Last month, I decided it was time to rid my yard of weeds once and for all. I did. I'm clearly not much of a gardener either. Actually, I wanted to rid it of one weed, my nemesis, Oxalis pescapre. You may know it as Bermuda buttercup or sourgrass. Now, at times, I really enjoy oxalis. The leaves look kind of like clover, 3 leaflets, heart-shaped, joined together at the tips. And in the spring, it produces zillions of clusters of bright yellow flowers on thin green stalks. They're pretty, really pretty, in small areas, mostly in other people's yards. In my yard, once the flowers die and the soil dries up, they form this matted mass of decay that crowds out anything else that's growing there. I'm ready to plant some things I'd like to keep, so the oxalis has to go. So right after the first year, when the soil was still rain wet, I headed out, gloves on and hand trowel at the ready. And on a cold but sunny afternoon, I started pulling the oxalis. Friends, oxalis is not easy to get rid of. Here's why. Although the plants can root from cut or broken stems, they mostly grow from these little tiny underground bulbs connected by rootlets. When you try to pull the plant out by the stem, even if you get the roots, the bulb breaks off and stays in the ground. And it's ready to push up new stalks the second your back is turned. Well, it didn't take me long to figure out that I was not going to win this test of wills. I might be able to handle the spurge and the groundsel, the mallow and the thistle back there, but not the oxalis. It will keep coming back. Now, frankly, I was inspired by the plant's tenacity. Although you can't always tell from the surface, underground that plant was harboring life like crazy. It was preparing for its return, always. And when the time was right, it rises up in these brilliant and glowing numbers, numbers that overwhelm whatever might be trying to kill it. And I thought, this is what we, the people, need now. We need to harbor the spark of life and hope so that when we need to mobilize a mass response, we will be ready. More than that, we need to ground ourselves in the good soil of a faith that meets this moment. And what is it that grounds us? Well, Reverend Sadie Lansdale says that many of us UUs are rooted in the foundational belief that the arc of the moral universe bends toward justice. Okay? Martin Luther King said that, of course, but he was reaching back to abolitionist and Unitarian minister Theodore Parker, who said something similar over 100 years before. He wrote, "I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eye reaches but a little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by the experience of sight. I can divine it by conscience. But from what I see, I am sure it bends toward justice." I ask you, does that promise, that statement, ring a little hollow for you right now? I mean, we've been pushing the arc for a long time, right? And yet here we are again, with ICE and Border Patrol agent actions looking like slave patrols, with federally sanctioned agents assuming guilt based on color or association or location, attacking anyone whose presence threatens them, seemingly with presumed impunity. When detention centers are sprouting up like weeds to hold thousands of people in horrible conditions without due process or even access to medical care. When the justice system is used like a weapon, when the president and his cronies use racism as a blatant dog whistle to their base, when environmental laws are being ripped out, and so no one is tending the global warming that is happening. No, we cannot deny that white supremacist and authoritarian ideologies run deep in this country, and like strong but dangerous weeds, are nearly impossible to eradicate. Our faith must be more tenacious than that. Lansdale suggested that a sturdy faith, as she called it, doesn't need to be grounded in the idea that everything will be okay, that a just society will arise and never be undone. Perhaps injustice and hate will always be with us because we're only human. Instead, perhaps we can find faith in using our short but precious time on earth, doing what we can to foster love and justice in our own ways. Perhaps, she says, our faith can be grounded in the idea that much is yet possible. Nothing is certain. Everything matters. Much is yet possible. Nothing is certain. Everything matters. This feels true for me. And it puts me in mind once again of the garden. In the garden, there are so many variables, so many tasks, and so much that isn't fully in our control. There will always be both life and death, prized petunias and weeds, careful planning and accidents, new things to try, the wisdom of others to learn from, a need for both patience and action. So rather than being benders of the moral arc or tenacious plants waiting to make our move, we can consider ourselves, in Lansdale's words, gardeners of what is possible. So what does that look like? Well, in the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus tells a parable about a man whose wheat field is contaminated with weeds. The man tells his workers not to pull out the weeds because they would likely pull the wheat along with it, thus damaging the crop. Instead, he tells them, let both grow tougher until the harvest. At that time, I will tell the harvesters, first collect the weeds and tie them in bundles to be burned, then gather the wheat and bring it into my barn. One interpretation of these verses is that the wheat is the word, the good news of the kingdom of heaven right here on earth, in the form of a just society based on our love of our neighbor. The weeds in this interpretation are the counter message, a message of empire and dominance by the few, often through violent means. I like to think that Jesus is telling us there that the good news must live and spread even among the weeds. Now, I believe that Unitarian Universalist carries forth that good news, that a just society centered in love is possible and is, in fact, here among the weeds of empire. And that news spreads through our action and our words and our example of living faithfully. Although it's tempting to think so, the parable teaches that it is not our job to pull out the weeds of authoritarian and racism or shut down empire through violent means. Like the wheat, we must keep our roots and faith alive. We must take as much space as we can to crowd out that message of empire with our own life-giving message. And it is ours to tend the garden, love our neighbors, recognizing, of course, that everyone is our neighbor, to do justice and love mercy, so that those who seek this just society find it and help co-create it. For we UUs are not alone in this vision. One of the most touching things that has been happening in Minneapolis during all of these ice rage is that there are hundreds of people coming together to sing their resistance. They have taken their anger, their rage, and they are using it in this beautiful way. And have you seen videos of this? People gathering to sing? Many are gathering outside the hotels where ICE and Border Patrol agents have been staying. Hundreds of people using their anger and their fear and their grief and their love to create music. And sometimes they're singing this song. It's okay to change your mind. Show us your courage. Leave this behind. It's okay to change your mind, and you can join us here anytime. That song, and those singing it are, of course, appealing to the conscience of the agents, right? But perhaps more importantly, the singers are actively acknowledging the kindred spark of humanity within those agents, even with agents who won't acknowledge the humanity of their targets. They are recognizing in those in those we oppose, the inherent dignity and worthiness that is at the heart of our shared value of equity. That is truly putting love at the center, speaking truth to power in a profound moment of calling in. Like those singers, to be gardeners of what is possible, we must collaborate with as many people as possible, those who bring other skills and wisdom and experience to the task. Those of us who have been part of the dominant culture, like myself, must learn from those of us who have been targeted and marginalized for generations, especially from the African American community. Those who have persisted and resisted with a resilience that is vastly underestimated. The immigrant communities in this country have that kind of resilience too. As I said, here's the thing. It's not possible to do this work alone, both because the task is too big for any one of us, and because the truth is that there is no getting around our interdependence. Like root systems in the garden, we are interconnected. And that should give us courage to do what needs to be done. Thinking back to Spirit of Life that we sang this morning, when Carolyn McDade wrote that, she was burnt out by her social justice work. The song was written as a personal prayer, which, she writes, means, may I not drop out. But it is also a prayer for community, because if her roots or my roots are to be held closely, they must be interwoven with the roots of others. Thus, Spirit of Life is also a prayer for community to hold and be held in, a community with which to sing compassion, to sing our anger, a community in which to practice giving life the shape of justice. So, mixing metaphors here, I see us both as plants and as gardeners. We are rooted to the ground that we tend, rooted deep in the faith of liberation. Our lives are nourished in that ground. The stronger the root system, the more resilient the forest is, when the storm passes through, and the more resilient our community is as it responds to change. Friends, we may still be hoping for that mythical lever that will bend the moral arc toward justice once and for all, the button that will make everything okay. But there is no guarantee that these things exist. And given that we are all human, there will always be those driven by greed and a desire for power who will oppress and exploit others for political and material gain. The plants we do not want may always be part of the garden. And yet, much is yet possible. Nothing is certain. Everything matters. So take the tools nearest you, be it the hoe or the trowel or the watering can, the picket sign or the song, the pen or the cell phone or the food basket. Put your roots down into the good soil and weave them tight into the fabric of community, the good ground of faith. The most important strategy for resistance is to remember that even our small effort is of use. In fact, it's essential. The outcome, at least in our lifetimes, may not be what we imagined, but it will have its moments of beauty. May we grow like plants with deep roots of strength and tenacity. May we tend the garden of what is possible, faithfully. And may we trust that after the digging, after the planting, after the long season of tending and growth, the harvest comes. Amen.